Hello all, welcome back to our course on digital accessibility, and this is the fourth episode in the series of invited guests and trying to learn from their experience and expertise from contributing in research or product development in the domain of accessibility through their work. And today we will try to learn about Anchal and her experience with research and product development in the domain of accessibility. Her work spans IIT Delhi and MIT. She's a researcher as well as a Fulbright scholar, and her work on tactile perception and inclusive learning offers valuable insights for accessible educational technologies. So, how we can leverage her expertise is something that we'll try to do today, and we will try to see how different ways of perceiving learning and interacting with technologies can shape the future of education. So welcome Anchal, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Richa, for inviting me. And I'm here more as a learner, and I'll try to learn equally from your dialogues also, and would like to share my experiences in research.
So let us try to start with your journey. And when we talk about accessibility in education, what has been your journey? How did you kind of got interested in the domain? Let us walk through that lane first.
I had a little bit of academic background into education. Like I was trying to, also interested in, say, some developmental psychological research. And I was working with sighted students before I entered my PhD. And like my goals for my research were clear. Like I wanted something to be at the intersection of good, rigorous scientific acumen, innovative thinking, and capacity for impact. So when I entered IIT Delhi and the assistive technology ecosystem with my mentor, Professor PVM Rao, we discussed several possibilities about, what solutions can we look at or what questions can we ask in the accessibility domain. And because I had like a prior background in education and working with students, I found this question of, how do we create better tactile diagrams for people who are students who are visually challenged quite fascinating. Because until now, I was just looking at, say, sighted people and general learning, but now thinking and empathizing with people who haven't seen anything, that as a researcher provided me an entirely different opportunity, and I like jumped right in. So that was my introduction to accessibility in education, and it has been a fascinating journey so far.
Great, good to know. So, when we talk about accessibility, particularly in education, what does it mean beyond physical access or basic digital compliance? And why do you think a broader perspective about multimodal access is necessary?
I think this is a very important question, Dr. Richa. So, when it comes to accessibility in education, schools and digital accessibility, all of this, so, see, the first very initial introductions for us used to be like, okay, the ramps and, access to hallways and all of these things have to be like correct, and PDFs do they pass the accessibility checks and all of these things. But I think I was opportuned to be looking at, the depths of research. So, particularly if citing the example of my research, when we started to look at, how do blind individuals comprehend shapes or diagrams. So it wasn't really just, tweaking the existing conventional diagrams and making them accessible to the blind population. We actually took a more in-depth, grounded theory approach to really understand how would, say, a born blind person understand about a cube or an object, and is it any way similar to how a sighted person starts to understand it. So that disparity at the fundamental level, that like made us a little surprised, and also intensified the need of, really going to the fundamentals and not having like these cosmetic checks, that sometimes happen in accessibility. So, right, from my perspective, I think that perspective to really start from the roots to really understand how is a particular information making sense to a blind person. Is it really accessible at the conceptual level? I think that perspective is really important because once the fundamentals are on point, all the different kind of tools, be it digital, or multimodal, if you have like audio descriptions, say, or anything, if you have like the fundamental content right, I think all of them will be quite effective.
So, kind of coming back to the learning environments, for example. So, can you let us know a little bit from your personal experience during your research? And I'm sure you might have met with a lot of students who might be struggling in their learning environments. What are those challenges and gaps, particularly in terms of how a technological intervention can fill such gaps? What are those gaps which our learners can, kind of try to innovate and fill those gaps, if you would like to shed some light on that?
So probably uh, so maybe I can tell from the tactile learning perspective. So first of all, I would like to point out, in the initial visits I had for my research, I visited like different blind organization in various parts of India. So first thing I found was like the kind of infrastructure or funding that these schools or organizations have. That really changes how much technology or tools these people are able to adapt. Along with that, I think even if the tools are there, the right conditioning and co-learning with the special educators, that I think is really really important. Like training with those tools and really that starting to make sense to the students, that is really important for adoption, is what I felt. And sometimes I feel that, so these students sometimes come from a very lower socio-economic background, and a lot of refined or sophisticated technology can add on to a gap. So there I think the role of special educators is tremendously important for them to act as a bridge between advancing technologies and the state of the students, in terms of say language or how much are they able to perceive. So they are the ones who can really bridge this gap.
So, as you rightly mentioned, that there are existent issues in terms of the existing technologies as well, or the socioeconomic backgrounds as well. So, and one of the major aspects of emerging technology is that it is highly visual in nature, right? So all of the interactions which are screen based, and more interactions in our day to day environments are becoming screen based. So then as soon as we again bring that perspective back to our educational accessibility, the same screen based interactions kind of pose a very fundamental challenge for students who are visually impaired.
Yes.
So what perspective shifts are required in order to make those learning environments more accessible?
So I would actually see it as a two-stage problem to tackle. So first, I think, and what is usually most adopted is that, so these students could be trained in using these digital, accessibility tools. And right now, I think these tools are much more governed from perspectives of sighted. Like whatever descriptions you might have, they are from a sighted perspective, and they are made accessible. So first, I think barrier is to be able to access that kind of modality, right? But what goes beyond?
Mm.
So if I say, okay, there's this document about say a mathematical concept, and now a blind student is trained and they are able to understand whatever is written. But I would still like to stress that the problem is more on the fundamental level, like the conceptual levels. So we still don't know yet and that demands more fundamental research on how does like a particular concept really make sense to a blind person. So if I'm explaining a diagram, right, I will start like my descriptions about that diagram would come very heavily from a sighted perspective. But do I know is that sequencing or that logical flow is actually something which is making sense, or triggering an imagination for that blind person? So that those are the questions I would rather ask,
Hmm.
because that is more important in bridging the gap.
So I'm sure our learners are kind of understanding that there is definite research gaps in this area, and this can be a prospective opportunity for you to explore research in this direction. Let us talk about a few major milestones that have happened in your journey. And in your work, you got an opportunity to, you scored the Fulbright scholarship through your research, and you also got an opportunity to present your work internationally, along with making India proud when you were able to present your work for international platform where Mr. Narendra Modi was also present alongside you. So can you share some learnings from those interactions?
It was definitely very fortunate, but at the same time, a great learning experience. So, first, I would like to actually tell about the Fulbright. So, Fulbright happened at a stage when I really felt that my research, in order for me to justify the research I am doing, I require a different perspective, a different lens, and maybe learn a different skill set. So that was my core motivation for applying for a Fulbright. So while I come from a more applied, say, a design and assistive tech background, at one point the research really demanded, because we were taking it from the fundamental lens, it demanded an understanding of cognition and maybe learning through different modalities like vision. So at that point, I applied to the Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences at MIT, at the Sinha Lab, which is known for computational vision, to understand my research problem in a better form. So I think my exposure to the lab, which brought together people not just from different cultures and countries, but also like different domains which tied down very well together. So there were like fundamental neuroscientists, there were people working in computational neuroscience, and then some people from AI background. So, and I was there from the tactile domain. So, we used to have like these discussions which were great learning. So, just talking about how a scene or an object is perceived. I would, this great difference between global to local that happens in vision and touch. These were the kind of questions we used to discuss. Vision is something that is more global and spontaneous, while tactile sense is more sequential and local in nature. So those kinds of complementary discussions really enhanced the perspective. And then towards the end of my Fulbright experience, I think there was a state visit which was due in the US at that time, where the Honorable Prime Minister of India, along with other dignitaries, were uh, coming together to, the theme was about education, skilling, and all these different things. So I think they wanted some Indian representations also. So they were reaching out to different labs, professors, and potential students who were there in the US at that time with the Indian nationality. So after some like rigorous background checks and interviews, finally I got to know that I mean, we knew that we are a selected cohort which would be there at the event, but I didn't know that I would be there presenting with the Prime Minister and the First Lady. So that was to be able to, express and share about the research at that platform. I think was definitely a great personal moment, but in general, at large, I think it was a greater opportunity to uh, spread awareness about accessibility and inclusivity, and how global partnerships can tie into each other and make a worthwhile contribution.
Great to know about those amazing milestones. Kind of extending the point that you mentioned about generating or creating awareness about accessibility in general, and particularly with people who are in charge of policy making and all of those aspects. So, in light of recent policy changes which have happened in our country as well, related to accessibility and the right to access as well. So, how do you think now the paradigm for emerging technologies and this interdisciplinary collaborations can contribute to both in terms of innovation as well as policy, in particularly in the domain of accessible education in India?
So I think this is a very opportune time for India because, say, if we talk about the past decade or something, so accessibility was still seen as a niche. It wasn't like a well-renowned field in itself, and it was just seen like a very small cosmetic add-on to the mainstream. So this is how it was seen, and it was lagging behind even more because there was no support from policy. But now I think there is immense governmental support, and all the verticals that are being adopted. I mean, there are mainstream technologies India wants to be you know an expert at, say now AI, semiconductors, climate, and all of these are mainstreams. But it's very refreshing and empowering to see that inclusion is becoming like an important vertical of all of them, not like a secluded niche. And what's also, I think, is going to really help is people who are actually uh, physically challenged, they are taking leadership positions and they are co-creating such technologies. So that I think is really a very, very positive direction in that. And the biggest thing that happens is biggest roadblocks that come into you make accessible tools for education and all of these things. You make it in the lab, you make it in academic settings, but it sees an end if it does not have an adoption strategy or modes of all of those. So there the policy level changes and government intervention really creates that fluid channel. So I think now is a really good time for that fluidity to happen more. And just seeing like more people who are actually physically challenged come into this is more empowering.
That is certainly true, and that has they have led this shift in policy in the recent times, and that is again a very good aspect which is happening in our country right now. So another aspect now, like since we are moving into a more generic inclusion kind of a perspective, you also associated with the vernacular innovation program with the Atal Innovation Mission as a design thinking mentor, I believe. And so, where those programs are trying to make education not just accessible beyond barriers of language, beyond barriers of socio-economic barriers and all of those. So how do you think that in that perspective, what role does technology or such programs play in bridging those contextual or cultural or linguistic differences in our country, thus leading to wider inclusion, particularly in education?
I think when we talk about India, the kind of diversity that India has, it demands inclusive strategies which go beyond like a generalized. It's very important to get vernacular and local at one level. And I think the motivation behind vernacular innovation program, which was the initiative by AIM Niti Aayog, and the partner was IIT Delhi. So I had the opportunity to be at the forefront of coordinating it because Professor PVM Rao was actively involved. And so I got to really like coordinate all aspects of the program, including mentoring certain special educators. And I think it is tremendously important, an important step towards inclusion, because it's not just about having one body of information and translating into local different languages, but also from the education perspective, there are so many concepts that are have their own local terminologies, and it's only when you explain it to them using those analogous concepts which exist in their local world is when a concept is actually effectively translated in education. And in India, that diversity is immense. I don't know about like other countries, but you know say even in a particular region, in a particular state, that diversity between locals, say a village, a school in a village, to a tier 2 or something, is so diverse that taking care of that local language and learning by analogy, that is very, very important. So I think such initiatives, and recently I think the vernacular innovation program has been also adopted and gained the lipi status, so it will now be propagated regularly and to more parts of India.
Definitely. So, what we also kind of got from your perspectives is there is always, it is seen that there is a gap in between the research insights in the domain of accessibility and what the people who are innovating or implementing or creating all of these digital solutions, for example. So, in exchange of ideas or possible collaborations between them is most of the time not there, which is kind of the learnings from both are kind of not fueling each other. So they're all working in their own silos. So, what are the reasons for the same in your perspective, and how we can bridge that gap?
So again, I think a very important gap uh, that you mentioned, and I think there are like several factors to it. A couple of which I can think of are definitely the mode of operation and incentives. So uh, most of the times academic research is what, like, the incentives for it is novelty, publishing certain papers and getting more research breakthroughs. So what it generally rewards is that uh, you have like a knowledge creation, while these applicability and innovation implementation, all of these things require certain scale and speed. So I think this mode of operation and incentive, they are like major factors in creating this gap. And also, I think recently there has been like a good amount of effort in bridging this gap and allowing more dialogue between these different people. But I think more opportunities, conversations, and maybe more initiatives on the policy end to bridge and bring together researchers and practitioners to a mid stage where there is a translatory period where these people can actually contribute, and these people can share their experiences, and both can actually come together with a you know active prototype or a proof of concept that is ready to be disseminated to the public and all of those things.
So, what do you think? What roles do educators, teachers, or researchers, and technologists, innovators, and policymakers? So, these are like three verticals, right? So, policy, technology, and research. So, people working in each, what role do you think they can play in a bridging those gap and thus making accessibility a systemic feature rather than an afterthought?
So I think all of these, people working in these verticals, all of them have certain strengths which the other misses just because of the kind of experiences or everyday work that they are doing. So, people working in technology, they may understand technology more, they may understand about, adoption, penetration, scale, target user, and all. However, people who are working on the research, they understand the roots, they understand people perception, right? And the core of the problem. And I think they need to really mix with each other at different levels of their work. So when a research problem is being started in a lab, at that point, if technology people come and they tell about the broader landscape, then that would really help refine the research problem that researcher is starting to work at. And then when a research problem has matured to a level, there have been enough user feedbacks, at that point the researcher really understands, has gained enough empathy to understand the temperament of the user. At that point, this person can go back to the technology person and really say, okay, these are the insights and this is how your technology can adapt likewise. And then policy plays like a great role. It's not necessarily coming at the end. It has to develop an infrastructure for these two to thrive. So it has to be like it has to be like an umbrella over these two domains right from the start when this is getting into progression. So I think uh, a holistic interaction between all three verticals at different stages is required to really create a stable and sustainable.
So, I mean, looking ahead, what gives you hope about the future of accessible education? And in that light, what mindset should today's students who are in their undergrad, and most of our audiences are in that age group, should adopt if they want to meaningfully contribute to accessible education and accessibility?
So I would just suggest, I think students to, not see accessibility as a terminology, right? And really try to think from, physically or whatever kind of disability a person has, try to empathize with that person, right? So that I think is one major mindset shift that students need to have. It's not really about, like, you're not doing these people a favor, or it's not about just helping them in certain ways. It's an entirely different way of thinking. And specifically, people who are inclined more towards human centric or design fields, this is even a greater opportunity for you to develop that perspective and to enhance like your sense of learning. So I think that. And the second mindset shift is not to look at accessibility as a very external factor, but and not something that you adopt at a later stage. So whenever you are approaching a problem, just really think. Maybe I'll cite from my example. So I mean, see, sometimes, so if I have, there are two approaches. So if I want to explain a graph or a mathematical diagram to a blind person or create resources for them, is my approach, okay, this is a standard and this is how I'm going to tweak it for the blind person. So, as a student or a researcher, I would have had two choices at that stage of my research or career, right? Or the second is to really get from them, to really understand, is it even making sense at the first place? And I was astounded that the disparity was huge. And the kind of, adoption happens at a scale. There are multiple tools that are, getting developed every day, but they lack those fundamentals. So more than just working in accessibility, say, or getting introduced to a accessibility domain, it became a responsibility that if you don't try to understand the depths of it, how would you really, it's all then very superficial or surface level. So I think try to get into my suggestion to students is to try to get into the depths of things and really question each and everything. It's a fascinating world. I mean, multimodality is a fascinating world. Uh, and it really allows you to grow as a researcher and also gives you the opportunity for a greater social impact.
Great to know about all your thoughts in this domain. And particularly when we say a mindset shift can induce a hopeful future for this domain, definitely. And as you rightly said, students can imbibe a different mindset of more human centric approach, even if you are working or learning your learning to become a developer, or you if you are becoming a designer, or if you are becoming a researcher, or if you're going to even work in policy. That mindset shift, as suggested by Anchal, can help you in imbibing the frameworks, the philosophy in itself, whichever vertical you choose to grow in. And each vertical, as we discussed in this discussion, has its own value and its own impact in the overall accessibility environment, in the overall achievement of access overall in various aspects, right? Be it education, be it linguistic disparity, be it cultural disparity, all of those. So we as a country not just have abilities disparity, we also have so many other kinds of disparity which need to be included in whatever solution you think of. So just try to go deeper. I think that is the main crux of the discussion. Is it's of course evaluation methodologies and frameworks and compliance and all of those are of course there, but also understanding deeply real root of the problem, or understanding the insights that research is kind of able to provide, can help you develop, can help you intervene in a more meaningful manner, probably, whichever vertical you choose to contribute in. So if there are any more thoughts, Achal, if you would like to share with our audiences.
Yes, so I think just following up on what you said and to summarize the class, I think there was an interesting quote by Einstein, and I think my professor also used to regularly point it out. So if you had about uh, an hour or so to solve the problem, then he said I would take 59 or 55 or 59 minutes, the major portion of it, to think about the question or what the problem is, and then the final 1 or 5 minutes to actually solve it. So I think that approach, when you really start to question that, I think true innovation and research just really follows. And that, I think, if the students in our country really imbibe, it would take the developing research ecosystem in our country to great heights.
Great, good conversation, Achal. Thank you for sharing such rich perspectives on accessibility, learning, and technology. This conversation highlights that accessibility is not only about inclusion, it is about improving educational quality for everyone. And for our NPTEL learners, we hope this discussion encourages you to think critically, think deeply, and about how technologies can really support diverse learners, diverse users, diverse contexts, and kind of imbibe that mindset in your learning, in your work, in your approach in general. So thank you, Anchal, for joining us and sharing your learnings about your journey and your expertise with our audience.
Thank you for having me. It has been a pleasure.